This is an Apple Lightning to headphone jack adapter, but it makes a really great Q-tip. Alright, what's going on, guys? Blood Moon Bobby here, and we are finally looking at my iPhone 7. In case you guys didn't know, I tweeted about this a couple weeks ago that my Nexus 5X, which was a really good Android phone, albeit a bit slow, finally died. I actually owned two of those phones, and both eventually ended up dying. And a big part of it was because of that boot loop issue that everyone with a Nexus 5X had, where the phone would just keep resetting itself, and now it got to the point where it's restarting itself and it won't even boot up. And I've tried repairing it several times. I even went down to the Android BIOS to format the phone and reboot it, and that did not work out well. And I had an iPhone SE, but unfortunately I lost it for a time up until recently, and I'll show it in this video. So I ended up getting an iPhone 7, not just to replace my Nexus 5X, but I figured even if I found my SE, I still wanted something with a screen that was just as big as the Nexus 5X, but it still ran iOS, mainly because I tend to prefer iOS and I've had better experience with iPhones over Androids. I mean, yes, iOS isn't perfect either, and there's certain features I miss from Android, but I'll get into that in this video. So what do I think of the iPhone 7, which I will turn on right here? And the quick and dirty my quick and dirty thoughts on the iPhone 7 is that it's easily one of the best smartphones I owned. It's a very quick phone. The screen looks great, and I've had experience with iOS for the past 10 years. My first device was a second generation iPod Touch. It's, just as good. iOS still is good. And even though, yes, it had to catch up on a few features on iOS over the years, it's good that it finally has caught up, and it's now neck and neck with Android more than ever. So, let me actually get to the Achilles heel, mainly because everybody's been talking about this problem with the iPhone, and yes, even myself, I'll admit, as you probably saw in my, I was too close, but you could see the Achilles heel and probably the biggest problem I have with the iPhone 7, and that's, as you can see here, lack of a headphone jack. I mean, I have to use this lightning dongle. Unfortunately, since I bought a used version, it didn't come in the box, so I had to buy one from my college's bookstore. But yeah, it's really annoying, and I'll show you here once I get my iPhone 7 back in focus. As you can see, there is no spot for a headphone jack. You just get, I'll pick this up. And yes, I'm using the product red case. It has no headphone jack. You can just see the bottom just has the speaker and the mic. There's nothing on the top. There's obviously, Apple doesn't put headphone jacks on the sides of their iPhones. And just put it back into place here. It's really annoying that I have to plug this in. And I haven't lost my dongle yet, but there's definitely been times where I'm working and I'm digging for my pockets asking, where's my dongle? Okay, that sounds so cool, but where's my headphone jack dongle? Where is it? And, I have to go back to the last room I was working, or, I have to look around the table. So, yeah, if you're a very absent-minded person, and I am myself, you're gonna want to be pretty careful with the dongle. I know Apple does sell Lightning EarPods, which I've tried in the past. I actually bought a pair, and they actually sound pretty good, and EarPods fit my ears. They may not fit yours, and my sister is texting me. He lost my train of thought there for a second. But the problem with Lightning EarPods is no other devices aside from iPhones, iPads, and some iPods support the the EarPods with a lightning port. Not even their current MacBooks have the lightning port. So it's so weird. I mean, I'm like what Jerry Rig Everything said. Zach, the guy's name is. He thinks that they took out the headphone jack because if it has to be plugged for lightning, the headphone manufacturers have to pay Apple for each pair they make. And I definitely think that is the case because isn't it so weird how they have the lightning jack on iPhones, but they don't have them on MacBooks? You know what I'm saying? But I've gotten used to it. I've basically just left my adapter or plugged into my earbuds. I mean, obviously, when I have to plug them into my MacBook when I'm video editing, I then I have to take them off. But I've gotten used to it. The only thing I really hate about this is, well, the other thing I really, other than I have to use a dongle to plug in a pair of earbuds, is if I have to charge my iPhone on there isn't a second lightning port on the iPhone 7. I have to just unplug it and then listen to music on my laptop instead. So that's basically my headphone jack around. You could definitely live with it, but it's still really annoying. But as for the phone itself, the iPhone 7, as I said before in my quick little review, it's definitely still a good phone. And let's actually go into other things like the design here. I'll take it out of its product red case. The phone is a really well designed product, especially the darker colors. I didn't get the jet black version only because I wasn't sure if they if you could buy the jet black one on eBay, and also because jet black gets scratched up. Not as horrible as I first feared it was going to be, but it's still, when you have something shiny, it's going to pick up a lot of fingerprints. But as for the design itself, it's a really well designed phone. I know a lot of people don't like how iPhones for a while have had the same rounded curved design, but I'm still a fan. I mean, I would like to see Apple change it up like at least every 2 generations, but objectively speaking, it's still a well-designed, good-looking product. Especially like how on the black model, the way it reflects light. I thought it was going to be too simple, but it's actually a really nice product. Also, just wanted to point out, I also like how on the black model that the antenna lines are actually surprisingly discreet. I mean, my camera's making me look like a liar, but I like how, even though you could see them on the sides, they also, the way they wrap around the backside of the phone, you can barely see them. So that's definitely another note I wanted to make. In fact, at this point, it really does feel like I'm using an iPod Touch. It's become so thin. You know, it definitely has a sturdier aluminum than on my 5th generation iPod Touch. Like my 5th generation iPod Touch feels, as light as feathers. But the iPhone 7 uses Apple's 7000 series aluminum so that it won't bend as easily. So it feels much girthier, but it's still pretty light. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to do a bend test because I saw on Jerry Rig Everything's video, when he bent it, he actually tore the waterproofing adhesive, which I don't want to do that myself. If this used model is still very waterproof, I am, not going to risk tearing the adhesive. So that's one of the obvious problems with buying, especially a waterproof product used, is that you don't know if the person who sold it to you has opened it up. So you got to be careful. It would be nice if they at least told you, no, it's still waterproof, we haven't opened it up. Because when you open the iPhone 7 up, it tears the adhesive, the waterproofing adhesive, so your phone is not going to be as waterproof. So that's why I haven't tested the waterproofing myself for that particular reason. I will say that I have used it in the rain without a case, and just yesterday when I was walking up to my workplace, I had a cup of soda and I tripped and the soda kind of splashed on the iPhone and it works okay. I mean, obviously don't try that with soda because, soda has a lot of sugar and it's sticky, so it's not, your phone is not going to be as resistant to that, to, a soft drink. But I am glad it is working. So, um, that's basically it on design. Durability wise, I think as long as you're careful, you should be able to use them without a case. Especially, I mean, obviously the jet black version, you're gonna want to get a case. But if you buy this in black, gold, silver, or rose gold, and if you don't want a case, which I'm not a person who likes using a case a lot, you should still be just fine. And I will say though, when a couple days after I bought the iPhone, I accidentally dropped it. I mean, the bigger size means it's not obviously not going to fit in your pocket as well. And I don't know, if I could bring this up closer to you guys. Let's see. Let's see how close I can get. I don't think I can get that close, maybe. And yeah, you can actually see it. The camera lens got scratched, so yeah, this isn't exactly the kind of phone you want to put in your pocket. I mean, I've kept it in my pocket ever since, and it's held up okay. But if you're gonna be super careful, if you want to be super careful about this, you definitely definitely want to get a case. And as I've said many times in my video, I do have Apple's product red case, and it's been holding it up pretty well. I also do have a screen protector, but I had to take it off because I put it on wrong and it messed with the touch sensitivity. So let's move on. And so the iPhone 7, obviously being the model prior to the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 8, it doesn't run Apple's A11 Bionic processor. Instead, it's got Apple's A10 processor, which is I believe it's a 3-core processor, and it still holds up pretty well. I mean, apps still open generally pretty fast. Not as fast as the 8, obviously, but still opens relatively quickly, as you can see with Facebook here. I'll go into Google Maps, which I still prefer over Apple Maps. Apple Maps got me lost one day, and my parents got super mad. So, yeah, it slows down a bit. Like it's funny enough, like after the first week of owning my iPhone 7, it actually froze up and I had to hard reset it, but it only happened once. I would say probably 80% of the time it still works just fine. And while I'm on the subject of turning my iPhone 7 on, let's actually talk about the screen of the 7, it's pretty much the same 4.7-inch LCD screen that Apple has used on the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6s. The one major change they made is that the iPhone 7 can actually run the P3. Its screen has the P3 color gamut as opposed to sRGB that was on prior models. So you're able to see more colors. I honestly can't really tell the difference, but between in terms of like color depth, but it's still definitely a nicer looking display. And actually, let me get my prior iPhone out just to do for comparison. Okay, so I pulled out my iPhone SE just for size comparison, and if you have an SE yourself and you're wondering how it compares to an iPhone 7, and it's definitely quite a bit bigger. I mean, I don't know. Let's see if I could actually place it on top. Strangely enough, in my eyes, it doesn't look a whole ton better, but I will say that the 7, it's definitely, because of the bigger size, it's a lot nicer to type and watch movies on. The latter, which doesn't bother me as much because I'm pretty much fine with watching movies on any size screen. But yeah, I will say in terms of color difference, I don't know if it's just me. The SE's screen looks a tad warmer. I don't know if you guys can see it on the video. I mean, you can a little bit, but I've noticed especially when I have night shift turned on, and I've checked in the settings. Night shift was set at the exact same level. The screen on the SE definitely looks a little warmer, and also the 7 screen is also a bit brighter. I mean, I have it set on the exact same, or at least near the same brightness level, and it definitely looks just a little bit brighter, so I'm glad Apple changed that. I mean, speed-wise, the 7 is definitely definitely quite a bit faster than the iPhone SE. The SE isn't a slow phone, especially compared to my Nexus 5X or certainly the 5th generation iPod Touch, and I think it tests quite a bit better than the iPhone 5S, which my sister is currently using as her daily driver. But it definitely lags a little bit in comparison to the iPhone 7. I mean, I'm not, it's making me look like a liar right now, but let's see if I open Safari on both. Yeah, you could definitely see that Safari opened up quite a bit faster on the 7 in comparison. And but overall, definitely the 7 is definitely the faster phone. And now I will go back to the standalone iPhone 7 review. Just got to make sure it is relatively censored. One other thing that the 7 has, I mean, this was introduced on the 6S, but I definitely definitely taken a liking to it, and that is the 3D touch feature, where if you hold down on an icon, you get your options, like in this case Google Maps, you get your list of places and sending your location. I find it more practical with something like YouTube, because you can launch either a search or look at your subscriptions or create your own videos. And I also use it quite a bit for Twitter, where if I hold down the button, you get search and your tweets and the ability to send messages. On some apps, the 3D touch isn't as useful, like on Instagram. I don't know, maybe it's just because I check my analytics. I kind of wished I was able to, go straight to looking at my analytics from here, rather than just you can view who liked your post. And in Slack, which I use for my newspaper, I wished it had like a list of my more recent contacts, rather than just a few like options, like what group do you want to use. So but overall, I definitely do appreciate the adage of 3D touch. I mean, it's not a new feature on the 7, but it's definitely nice to have. Let's actually talk next about the camera, which I'll show you some sample photos and videos right about now. The camera on the 7 is definitely really good. It's definitely one of the top smartphones I've tested. I haven't tried the Google Pixel 2, so I can't speak for that, but it's definitely, he takes some really nice and bright light photos. They're really crisp. I've taken photos at places. I mean, I've used the iPhone 7 in a variety of kinds of photography. Like, I took it to a low light puppy therapy show. I've also used this camera to film a school walkout on Snapchat. And speaking of which, videos also look really good on the iPhone 7 as well, as you can see. And low light footage especially, I filmed some driving with my mom. Low light is actually pretty good. I mean, it's definitely not, if you're going to be shooting in like really, really dark places, it can't see in the dark. But if it's, as long as it has some lighting, like as you saw in the footage where the cars were driving by, it could actually pick it up really well. The 7 was actually the first regular-sized iPhone to have optical image stabilization, and I would say you could rely on it, although it's not going to be your total lightsaver, especially lightsaber Star Wars, especially in dark lighting situations. I've noticed that it works all right when you're just walking, But especially if you're going to be taking photos using the volume button, you're going to want to be a little careful. So camera-wise, the iPhone 7 is definitely really good in that respect. So just get out of there. Other features it has, I mean, I've talked about the 3D touch. The camera is really good. The display is really nice. And I've actually got a list of features here. What else can I talk about? Oh yeah, the home button, which is the new thing about the iPhone 7 was the first iPhone to have the button itself. It's not a physical button like on previous ones. Instead, it's actually pressure sensitive, where when I click it, you actually get it kind of buzzes like it's haptic feedback, but it feels like a legitimate click. I will admit, when I first tried the iPhone 7 when it came out, the weird thing I experienced was that it didn't really feel like a button press as much as it just felt like you were pressing on the bottom half of the iPhone. But I still thought it was kind of neat. I've even tested, when I had that freeze up last week, I wanted to see if the home button would still at least click if the phone froze. And it actually does. I'm really surprised. I was really worried because it's done through software, it wouldn't respond. But I'm really amazed. After I got the 7 myself and started using it, I have gotten used to it. Strangely enough, now that I have it, maybe when I was testing it out, it was set on a higher sensitivity, but now it actually does feel like a legitimate click. So that's that was definitely really good to know. And what was I about to say about the home button? I will say the weird thing is that if you put it on a table, not on like on a bed, it's all right because it's sitting on a sheet, so it still feels like a legitimate click. But let's see if I could recreate what I'm saying using a book. Let's see. Just I'm gonna put it here. It's good enough. Yeah. The weird thing is that when you have it propped up on like a table, or if it's just lying flat, it feels like you really have to press it. And you could barely feel the sort of click when it's sitting on a hard surface. So that's just something you got to keep in mind. I mean, obviously, if I go into my notes and press the button, it's still responsive. It's just that it feels kind of weird. So don't worry about it. It still works, but it's just something, it's just, a kind of a quirk. And so the home button is definitely nice, and obviously the good thing is because it's not a physical button, you won't have to worry about repairing that button as much. I haven't had too many problems with my iPhone and iPod Touch and even iPad home buttons, but I know there's people out there that have had to have those repairs, so you won't have to worry about it as much. And next thing I'll talk about, I know some people are kind of disappointed that the 7 doesn't rotate in landscape mode. I don't mind it as much, or at least the same landscape modes you would get on something like the iPhone 8 Plus. And by the way, at least according to Detroit Borg, the iPhone 10 doesn't have a lot of the extra landscape modes from the Plus versions of the phone. But, obviously, if you go into like your messages, you can still rotate to, send a text message. I will say one quirk I don't like about the iPhone 7's keyboard is that you notice that when you have it in portrait mode, you have your numbers on the left and then you have your emojis on the right. In landscape, it's swapped. So that was really annoying. Like if I wanted to type in landscape, I would always keep forgetting to that the left side held emojis and the right had numbers. So it's kind of an annoying quirk, but I can live with it. Let's see here. So I talked about quite a few things. One mode that I really wished the iPhones had, and it's so weird because the iPads have it and Android has had it since Android Nougat, is I really wish there was a multi-window mode. And it's definitely not a horsepower thing because I've owned 2 prior Android phones, you know, the Nexus 5X and the LG Ultimate 2, and they had, even though they were kind of slow, they were able to handle multi-window applications, you know, using two apps at once just fine. So I really wish the iPhones could do that, because I remember on my Nexus 5X, I would do a thing where I would have YouTube open and I would have a web browser open. So if I wanted to look up a product, I was able to search it for it while I was watching it, kind of like on my computer. Um, so I don't know, maybe Apple will invent that sort of feature in the future. And so, other thing I will say, I have been hearing that, I don't think I'll be able to pick it up in this video. When you press the iPhone 7 right up against your ear, you do hear kind of weird processing sounds. It's not as bad as, you know, as people will tell you. You would have to like press it right up against your ear. It's kind of like, the best way I can describe it, it's kind of like the noises you would hear from like when your computer is like, you know, really pushing its processor and you start hearing noises. I mean, when you record videos, you won't be able to hear it, but if you put it right up against your ear, you'll definitely hear those processing, whirring sort of noises. And other thing I might also talk about, I have tested Apple Pay on my school's vending machines, and it works just fine. I personally wish more people would use it, but you know, people are suspicious of corporations, so you know, I know people. You know, phones are now being made of things like plastic, glass, or even ceramic to make way for wireless charging, because with metal backs, the electricity isn't able to get through metal as well as it can through glass and plastic. But I don't really mind as much, and generally speaking, at my college, I don't even know somebody who uses wireless charging. So if you do want that feature, obviously you're going to want to step up to something like the iPhone 8, which I would honestly recommend getting an 8 over a 10, only because I see the 10 as kind of more of a luxury upgrade, whereas the 8 is definitely the more sensible option. And I know there's people out there who I don't really understand, to be quite honest, who really don't like smartphone bezels. Like, I know that was kind of a knock people threw at the regular size Google Pixel 2 and the iPhone 8, which I don't know. Is it because people have gotten so used to bezel-less phones like the iPhone 10, the LG G6, and the Samsung Galaxy S9 that now having bezels is super distracting? If it bothers you, I totally respect that. But as for me, I prefer having, you know, some bezel to allow me to access navigation buttons or making way for things like stereo speakers, which that's another thing I should talk about. The 7 was the first iPhone to have stereo speakers, but it's kind of like the stereo speakers on something like the HTC 10 or the new Samsung Galaxy S9, where instead of having two front-facing speakers, it uses the earpiece as a speaker, and it uses you could see the speaker down here. And while it's definitely not as nice as dual front-facing speakers, it definitely sounds a lot cleaner than something like the iPhone SE, which just had one bottom-firing speaker. I really wish both were front-facing speakers, though. Let's see if I could actually pull up. Let's try. Hey, I don't know, maybe we could do like some kind of a speaker comparison here. It is really kind of surreal that the earpiece now works as a speaker, but it's definitely a lot nicer sounding. And I mean, obviously the bass isn't really goofy, but it's still nice to have. Okay, and here is my iPhone SE in comparison. Yeah, you can actually notice here when listening to on the SE, it definitely doesn't sound as rich, and it doesn't sound as loud as on the SE in comparison. So yeah, most people obviously use their headphones as opposed to their speakers because you want people to hear that you're still listening to Maroon 5. I mean, I'm just kidding. I do it myself too, but I'm definitely a person that prefers having your... As for battery life, as I try to get this on, battery life on the iPhone 7 is kind of like a very average for a smartphone. On days where I'm not using it, pulling it out of my pocket as much, like if I have classes in between breaks, I can usually, unplug it at 8:30 in the morning and get to using it until like around 4 o'clock. And on some days, I'll even say I was able to get it down to 7 o'clock. But it's definitely a phone where you're going to have to charge it every night you use it. As for days where I'm always doing something on it, especially if I need the brightness turned up high, if I'm using it outside or if I'm using the camera, yeah, you're going to be running out by around 3 in the afternoon. So in terms of like if you're just using it for really basic tasks like email, web browsing, and the occasional YouTube video, you should be fine battery-wise. But either way, you're going to have to be charging it every night. This is definitely not the kind of phone you can use for 2 days straight. And I will say, though, standby time, in terms of if you forget to leave your phone charging at night, is actually quite good. Not as good as I'd hope, but still really good. I mean, I left it one night at 100%. I just left it out, didn't charge it, and by the time I woke up, it only drained about 2% of batteries. So that's really nice to have, because I've had smartphones in the past where the battery would pretty much be kaput if I left it out overnight. I will say I do think it's really weird how only recently have iPhones been capable of fast charging. So because like the Nexus 5X I used to use had wireless charging, and that was a phone, not wireless charging, fast charging, and that was a phone that came out in 2015. And on top of that, the fast charger was included in the box, just like with pretty much every flagship phone, and even some budget phones I've seen have their own fast chargers. So I don't know. It's really really strange. I mean, obviously, Apple, what they want you to do is spend $50 for a USB-C charger and then $25 for the cable. But I really wished that came in the box. Just like, like the iPhone 7 right now costs $550, whereas the Nexus 5X was $380 when it first came out, and that had fast charging, and that was a phone that came out a couple years ago. So really wished. I mean, I'm also one of those people that really wished Apple used USB-C on their phones, or even Thunderbolt 3 as opposed to their own Lightning port. But, hey, if profit is calling, then I guess Apple is going to go to whatever side makes money, even if that's not exactly the best route for consumers. But as a person who's been using iPhones and iPod Touches for years, I've got plenty of Lightning cables. So, yeah. You get what you get. That's basically what I have to say. The nice thing I will say about having an Apple product over Android is that whereas with Android phones, you tend to lose software support after about 2 years, whereas with iPhones, you're usually good for around 4 years. So, yeah, that's definitely one of the benefits. And that was another reason why, even though I found my SE, with the iPhone SE, I would have been good for only about 2 more years, whereas with the 7, I would have been good for a 3rd year. So that's what definitely one of the benefits I like having. On the downsides, I do have, like the camera, because the thing about it is, unlike something like the 5th generation iPod Touch, which had a stainless steel lip around it to protect the camera, the part that protrudes the most is that front element. So you're going to want to get a case if you're not particularly careful. So and of course, as I mentioned in the very beginning of this video, I really don't like how you have to use a dongle now to get headphones, which, headphone jack is not an obsolete connector yet, Apple. I could see it if it was like on the MacBook Pro, for instance, which just have the USB-C ports and the headphone jack. With that one, at least the reason is because USB-C is the new standard and people like to use it. I wish that the new MacBook Pros had an SD card slot, but I do understand why it uses USB-C. It would have been nice if it included at least one USB-A port, but I can understand where at least the idea of putting USB-C ports on a computer. But final verdict, if you don't have the money to shell out for an iPhone 8 or 10, just like I sure didn't, then I would still definitely recommend getting the iPhone 7. If you want that, especially if you want that waterproofing, you probably definitely want to get it from a carrier or from Apple themselves. But as is, it's still a very good phone, easily the best smartphone I've owned, and I'm really glad I made the upgrade. And so this has been Blood Moon Bobby, and thanks for watching. Hey guys, this has been a Blood Moon Bobby video. Please like this video or dislike it, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.